Tonight,
Somebody started me at 2, 2.5, and 2.5, and 3. And
auctioning food to the lowest bidder, hunger, and a sign of the times.
Our first sale we had on February 13th, I had chairs for 200 people. I had over 300 people at my sale.
Give me liberty or give me death.
Deep in a recession, Virginia says no to stimulus from Washington.
Right now, if you go back and you say, I lost my part-time job and I'm going to apply for unemployment until I find another part-time job, they're going to tell you, you don't qualify in Virginia.
The military, training gang members to kill.
He's not doing Dirty Harry or, Scarface shooting off his hip. He goes straight to a true military position. This is not something he would have learned off the streets as a gang member. This is something he actually picked up in the military.
And emergency supplies in the hills of Afghanistan. We'll bring you the news next on Dan Rather Reports. Good evening. Tonight, an issue that many Americans thought they'd never face: putting food on the table for their family. The academic community calls it food security, but when you're working several jobs just to make ends meet, it might better be called food insecurity. As we travel this great country, we're amazed by growing hunger in this land of plenty. Hunger knows no borders, affects all races and religions. It plagues big cities and small towns. And that's where we begin the program tonight, in the mountains of northeastern Pennsylvania, where good old American ingenuity has met a growing need. The small towns and cities that dot the industrial landscape of northeastern Pennsylvania were built with the labor of immigrants, hoping for a better life. But the prosperity experienced recently by much of this country never quite materialized here, and life has always been a bit of a hard-scrabble existence. For decades, the factories and coal mines that once sustained the area have been slowly shutting down. Now, many of the clothing mills are scaling back, leaving people wondering about their future. Feeding one's family is uppermost in everyone's mind.
I know Roger has some fabulous ham steaks, which is one of his items usually right off the truck.
And they're doing it in ways that, in this land of plenty, are unusual, to say the least.
Somebody give me $20 on a pork roast, $20.
While auctions in other parts of the country are selling luxury cars and homes to the highest bidder, here in Dallas, Pennsylvania, they're auctioning food to the lowest bidder.
15 of it, have a $20 bill. 15, 17 and a half.
Unlike most auctions where bidders compete against each other and the price goes up, here the bidders, who are often working within a strict budget, wait for the lowest price possible, then all buy at once. And there's plenty to go around.
Somebody started me at $3, a bag of peanut butter cups, $3, 2.5 and go.
You won't see a lot of health food here. This is sustenance. Frozen food, canned goods, junk food, and even some practical necessities.
On the toilet paper, now let me explain it. It's all in date, and it's never been used.
Kirk Williams is a 20-year veteran of the auction business. He runs Colonel Kirk's Auction Gallery. He buys the food for a fraction of the wholesale price directly from warehouses that are looking to unload it because it's nearing the sell-by or best-by date, and then auctions it off for a few dollars.
Anybody else? 5-pound bag, $10?
According to Williams and his food buyer, Roger Noggle, everything they sell is perfectly safe to eat.
There is not one item in today's sale, dry goods, frozen foods, snack goods, candies, you name it, that I have not, will not, cannot, or won't take home to my own children, okay, to my own family, okay? We are very selective and very careful.
Somebody started me at 2.5. Yep. 2.5 and 3.5. 2.5.
Williams is used to selling antiques and collectibles. But when sales of those items slowed to a trickle due to the recession, he realized that what people really needed was relief from the recession.
People are trying to stretch their dollars. They don't want to lose their homes because they need to go out and buy groceries. So the best way they can buy groceries is coming to auction. They can save a lot of money.
The bargains have been fantastic. We got marshmallows for 50 cents a bag, which is unbelievable because they're brand name craft marshmallows. So you can't beat those bargains here.
Guys, I got a nice size ham steak, a little over a pound right there. It's $5 the ham steak, $5, $4.
Times are tough, and these shoppers are waiting for the lowest possible price before they make their move.
3 and 3 and a half, 3 and 3 and a half. 3 and 3 and a half. I wish I could say bidding was brisk and lively, guys. Come on. $2 in a ham steak. She wants 5. She wants 5. Now it's hands everywhere.
It's a sign of the times that ham steaks that retail for as much as $12 sell for $2.
19 gets 2. 57 gets 2. 22 gets 10.
For some, buying in bulk is the best way to feed their families on limited resources.
These are factory fresh.
And the deals on cheese curls are just as good.
I'm going to give you 3 bags. Let's get it sold.
Wow.
Most people have never heard of a grocery auction, but these auctions' popularity is growing fast.
Our first sale we had on February 13th, I had chairs for 200 people. I had over 300 people at my sale. Guys, I've sold a lot of these jelly beans, but I've never sold them for this price tonight. I'm going to make them $2.50 on the jelly beans for a 5-pound bag.
Williams has been getting calls from all over the country, Virginia, Arizona, even New York City, asking when he's coming their way.
3 and a half, 4, 3 and a half, 4, 3 and a half,
With
4.
demand growing, he does 3 to 4 auctions a week, averaging about $12,000 in sales.
33 down front, wants 2.
He nets about $1,000 at the end of the day after he's paid his employees, many of whom are friends and neighbors in need of some extra cash. But he says that what really makes it worth his while is knowing that he's helping his customers make ends meet.
I've actually had one guy come up to me last sale, gave me a big hug, and he said, honest to God, he said, I don't know you from Adam, but he said, I have $300 to budget for groceries this month for me and my kids. And he said, with this auction, he said, I've been able to save enough money. And he said, I know we're not going to have a problem getting through this month.
2 gets 1. Who else? Let's get those sold. $15.
Food for the lowest bidder in Dallas, Pennsylvania. Now, helping the unemployed. It was supposed to be one of the major benefits of the multi-billion-dollar stimulus bill recently signed into law. But there are seeds of a revolt brewing in state capitals across the country over stimulus money. It started in Virginia, where the legislature has turned down millions of dollars from Washington that would have helped some jobless workers. That's because the money comes with strings attached. In order to accept the cash, states will be required to broaden their unemployment insurance programs. But with Virginia's unemployment nearly double what it was last year, and with its benefits trust fund nearly insolvent, you might think the state would do anything to pocket an extra $125 million. But then you'd be forgetting your Virginia history.
Give me liberty or give me death!
Virginians have a long history of rebellion, as these protesters staging a tax day tea party in Richmond demonstrated recently. So when Washington tried to set the terms of the $125 million handout, perhaps it's not surprising, the House of Delegates revolted.
When are we going to tell the Congress of the United States that they don't set the public policy of Virginia?
We need to start telling the federal government, no, no way, we don't want your money.
In a largely party line vote, the Republican-dominated House of Delegates did say, no way.
Ayes 46, noes 53.
Turning down $125 million that could have helped the jobless because they said it came with strings attached.
Bottom line, it comes down to us to pay the tab.
Much to the delight of these protesters.
In regards to the legislature turning down the stimulus money, I think it was a good idea. We don't necessarily need it. We need to cut back on our spending as the first priority.
I just think it's totally wrong, and they did absolutely the right thing.
I think many of us have been very frustrated by the government encroaching upon states' rights.
I was just absolutely stunned that in a time like this where we've got a crisis, they would put this kind of ideological crusade ahead of the needs of everyday Virginians.
Democratic Governor Tim Kaine was furious.
One of them kind of crystallized the whole debate and said, we need to stand up and say no to Washington. It wasn't about these workers at all. They were trying to make an ideological case against the president, against Washington.
We would have to give unemployment benefits to people who left part-time work and were only seeking part-time work.
Brenda Pogge, a Republican, is one of the delegates who voted no.
We'll be expanding benefits to people who have never gotten them and don't expect them.
Right now, if you go back and you say, I lost my part-time job and I'm going to apply for unemployment until I find another part-time job, they're going to tell you, you don't qualify in Virginia.
Currently, about half the states give unemployment benefits to part-time job seekers, but not Virginia. If Virginia had changed its law, businesses would have had to pay a tax increase to cover the cost of the expanded coverage once the money from Washington ran out.
I think that fool's gold might be apropos. I have described it as a Trojan horse, and in comes the money, but in 2 to 3 years, it's gone. And then we have created a hardship on Virginia businesses.
I mean, are you going to look into the eye of somebody who's sitting around the kitchen table worrying about losing their job and say something like this is fool's gold?
Down the road in Williamsburg, the heart of Virginia's political history, we saw how this debate plays out among workers and employers in a town that hasn't suffered like this in generations. 300 years ago, this was the capital of Britain's biggest colony. Today, it's a top tourist attraction, and that's the source of its trouble. Tourism has dropped. Tax revenue from hotels is down 20%. And now Williamsburg's unemployment is at a whopping 19%, the second highest rate in Virginia.
Okay, that'll be 2410, sir?
Take these devices.
On your letter of credit. Very good.
Yes, thank you.
Unemployment here typically spikes in the wintertime when the tourists go away, and hotels, restaurants, and Colonial Williamsburg temporarily lay off some of their workers. But the spike hasn't been this high in decades.
The unemployment rate in Williamsburg went from, say, around 9% to 19%, just over 19%, in the span of 4 months. And that's really unprecedented.
Two things about the lab that the other class was having trouble with.
Quentin Kidd teaches political science at Christopher Newport University in nearby Newport News. He says the bad economy forced Williamsburg's businesses to lay off more people than usual.
There's a certain core staff that's around all year long. And I think what's happened, the reason we've seen that spike, is that the unemployment has dipped into that portion of the workforce. That portion of the workforce that's generally around all year.
Williamsburg's labor force is 5,816 people, according to the Virginia Employment Commission. An estimated 1,100 of them were unemployed in February, the most recent data available. Statewide, the unemployment rate has nearly doubled in 1 year, and Virginia has opened 6 new unemployment centers to handle the influx of need. In Williamsburg, the unemployed go to this workforce center to register for benefits and to search for available positions.
I'm struggling right now. Right now, I'm on the edge of falling off right now. Falling off. I can't pay bills anymore. This might be the last roundup for this month to pay rent for where I live at.
John Turner has had no luck finding a full-time or a part-time job.
Right now, yes, it's easy to find part-time jobs. In fact, I have applications out already for part-time work. But you still have that one problem. Will the employer call you or not? Because I'm not the only one looking for that part-time job.
Our system indicates you don't have any weeks left.
Andrea Collins has had no luck finding another full-time job either.
Everywhere I go, there have been 50 and 60 people applying, and someplace I've just started knocking on doors. I don't even wait for a want ad or a want sign. And people say, we're laying off, we're not hiring. Just pray for me. I've been laid off for a while.
Collins was let go from her $10 an hour job at a bank last year. Since then, she's been collecting $200 per week and was just reassured her benefits will continue for another 4 weeks.
Hallelujah.
Yeah, so just make sure when you're filing every week you have to wait until after Saturday, okay? Okay, so you do have some weeks, so you're all set. Okay? Thank you. All righty.
Collins qualifies for unemployment benefits because she is, quote, able and available, end quote, to work full-time. In a way, she's lucky. Virginia is one of the toughest places to get unemployment benefits. A mere 26% of the jobless qualify. Only 4 states and the District of Columbia are stricter than that. The maximum you can get in Virginia is $378 per week, ranking 30th in the nation. Some of those who can only work part-time because they're disabled, have children at home, or have other part-time jobs are left behind.
They should expand the benefits to each and everyone who needs benefits, no matter what the case. There should be something for them if they're only going to work part-time and can only work part-time. They might have children, they might have families, they might have, like I do, bills to pay, like everyone else. Expand the benefits as much as the government can, so people can at least keep themselves together.
Delegate Pogge didn't hear from many constituents. The mail she did receive was overwhelmingly positive.
Thanks for your responsible leadership. At a time when government spending seems out of control, your position will stand well with me at the ballot box. So this is something we probably need to go over.
Pogge says the 19% unemployment rate in neighboring Williamsburg did not change her mind, that unemployment benefits are only supposed to help those trying to find full-time jobs.
I think in principle and philosophically, someone who's looking for part-time work is not solely dependent on that work. Otherwise, they'd be looking for full-time work.
But we talked to a number of people who are dependent on part-time work. In laundry rooms and kitchens across Williamsburg, workers cobble together multiple part-time jobs because there are no full-time jobs. This Embassy Suites is one of the few hotels still doing well. Rooms are inexpensive and breakfast is free. Vince Edwards works 3 jobs.
I work here from 5 to 11. Then I leave here and I go to Chamberes, a retirement home. I work from 11 to 7. But on the weekends, I work for Williamsburg Catering Company. Basically, all the guys I work around, girls, we all work 2 jobs, just to make ends meet.
Kelvin Dillard works 2 jobs, and he says so do many of his co-workers.
I would say it's about half and half on both jobs that I know of, that half the people work either 2 full-time jobs or 1 full-time job and a part-time job.
People who are cobbling together these part-time jobs, they're heroes. These folks who are putting 2 and 3 jobs together to help their families out, they're heroes in a lot of ways. And we oughtn't to be, standing in their way, shaking our fist in their faces.
I believe if that part-time job was which helps them make ends meet, I think they should get something for that.
Kelvin's co-worker, Paul Smith, says he was clearing $90,000 9 months ago as a corporate recruiter for the construction industry. Today, he's clearing tables.
I went from making $50,000, $60,000 up to, $93,000 and, within a year's time. It was great.
But nobody's building hotels or office parks anymore.
I did that for 4.5 years, and July of 2008, it was just like somebody turned the tap off.
And so Paul works mornings at the Embassy Suites for $8.25 an hour.
That buys groceries. And, I know I'm living off my savings at this point, but that kind of stems the flow of the cash going out the door a little bit. You can't sit around and say, gosh, I have a master's, I can't clean a table, I've learned a whole new work ethic here. These guys are great. We'll get 600 people in here, and everybody here does their job. I basically, as soon as I hit that door, have to start working hard, and it's fun, to be honest with you.
But here's where Paul parts company with his coworkers. While he recognizes how hard they work, he worries that tax increases would hurt small companies. Virginia businesses already pay among the lowest unemployment taxes in the country, an average of $89 per employee annually, putting Virginia 49th in the nation. Only South Dakota businesses pay less than that.
We are a pro-business state, Democrats and Republicans alike. we love getting jobs, and we love, growing our own businesses and going out and getting new businesses to come here.
Governor Kaine acknowledges the proposal would have eventually led to a tax increase on businesses. He said it would be the equivalent of $4.50 per employee per year, or a penny a day for the businesses.
And so I thought, well, if we're 49th and we can make these changes that are basically, a penny a day per employee, then why wouldn't we make them to get $125 million of federal money to help us get through the worst economic climate that Virginia or this nation has seen for the last 50 years.
But that doesn't sit well with the owners of this Philly pretzel franchise in Williamsburg.
I just don't agree with the stimulus, part of that stimulus plan. They're looking to, possibly, pay all these unemployment benefits to these part-timers and all.
Bill and Mary Beth Staffieri had high hopes when they first got into the pretzel business 2 years ago, but now they're barely holding on.
We've had some regulars have been in here on a weekly basis, and now we're lucky if we see them once a month, once every 6 weeks. Would you like to get any dipping sauces today? Okay, we have $2, please.
They work 12-hour days, but are having a hard time paying rent.
What I'm doing now is I'm just paying weekly, anything that I can afford to pay, just to keep them somewhat satisfied.
Okay.
I mean, a big concern here is with all the expense that we have. I mean, we have to sell a lot of pretzels to even break even here to survive that week or that month.
Staffieri says any additional tax on business, even $4.50 per employee per year, is too much.
$4.50 per employee adds up over time, so it's I look at numbers all the time, and numbers are big for me.
Just like break 2 and then break 1. You always want to, if you have a pretzel sitting there open, just take this and wrap it underneath.
Staffieri says if forced to pay more tax, they'd cut back on other expenses, like hiring workers.
Okay.
And Delegate Pogge suspects the tax hike would be even higher. She says the governor is, quote, painting a rosy scenario in order for us to swallow this, end quote. With employers and employees divided on the issue, it's still too early to know what the political consequences of the House of Delegates' revolt will be.
If the economy continues to be sour in Virginia, and we go into a fall election with unemployment at 7-8% and 20% in certain parts of the state, then I think the Republicans who voted against it have to answer to that.
But if the state economy recovers, Professor Kidd says Republicans may have the upper hand.
Republicans point to the tea parties that occurred in recent days around April 15th and say, look, there's a populist sentiment that the government needs to rein in its spending and to be careful with taxes, and that unemployment benefit was simply irresponsible. It would tie the state to increased unemployment taxes as we go forward.
40 states still have to decide whether to change their unemployment laws to qualify for federal money. It now looks like Florida's legislature will also turn down the money over the Republican governor's objections. And as the issue gets debated in capitals across the country, Pogge has a message for legislators considering their own revolt.
Look long and hard at how it's going to affect you down the road. Who's paying the bills for this? How it's going to affect business and the attraction of business to your state. And it's a political saying. And the saying is this: as Virginia goes, so goes the nation.
Oh, sure, they catch a lot of hell.
It gives me satisfaction that Virginia had the backbone and the foresight to say no.
It should be noted that when Virginia legislators turned down that $125 million, they accepted the rest of the federal stimulus plan and are scheduled to receive $4.8 billion from Washington to fund an array of infrastructure, education, and health care programs. Coming up next on the program, gangs in the U.S. military. So stay here with us. Missed an edition of Dan Rather Reports? Or just want to see one again? We're now available on iTunes, so check us out. In 2007, we aired a startling investigation into how a growing number of street gang members had enlisted in the military. It was a touchy subject. The armed forces were desperate for new troops to fight in Iraq and Afghanistan and rejected any suggestion that they might be lowering standards for recruits. Well, unfortunately, the problem has not gone away, and the federal government is now acknowledging that quite publicly. The 2009 National Gang Threat Assessment, a multi-agency report sent to police departments across the country, warned of the growing threat of gang members in the military. So we thought it would be a good time to look back on our earlier report. For years, police on patrol in the nation's ganglands have been worried that recruiters haven't distinguished between those seeking job skills, discipline, and service to country from those who remain entangled in criminal street gangs. They have found an increasing number of unreformed gangsters returning from military service with access to arms, lethal training, and combat experience, all courtesy of the U.S. military. We're in the nation's gang capital, a dense and dangerous 10-square-mile swath of pavement, bunker-like housing projects, and fenced-in homes in south-central Los Angeles. It's a neighborhood gripped by nearly 60 street gangs. Many are at war with each other, but all see police as their enemy.
AK round, a 7.62 millimeter, will go through this door, through my vest, through me, through my partner, and right out the other side.
Sergeant Sean Colamy heads the neighborhood's gang enforcement unit. Colomy's team has fewer than 30 officers patrolling an area with 7,500 gang members. Police expect danger. They regularly confiscate guns, investigate murders, but they are unnerved by reports that dozens of young soldiers have recently returned to LA's tough neighborhoods from Iraq and Afghanistan with military training and access to heavy arms.
We've had gang members that were involved in shootings and turn around, were from the U.S. military, had been in Iraq, and now have been arrested for murders that have occurred within our division. One of the concerns as we as gang officers or even patrol officers working in an area that's gang infested is that with that type of knowledge, you're coming down the street and you engage a suspect or a gang member with a shoulder weapon, and that person knows how to use that weapon. They have such a tactical advantage on you.
We obtained an LAPD intelligence report identifying dozens of LA area criminal gangs with members in the military. The roster includes traditional black gangs like the Crips and Bloods, Asian gangs, Hispanic gangs, even the Hells Angels. The document counted 80 military-trained gang members now living in Los Angeles County and 20 others in nearby areas. Colamy and his unit recently investigated a gang shooting in the sprawling Nickerson Gardens housing project, a sadly familiar part of his job. But there was something startlingly different about this particular shooting spree. Multiple witnesses reported the shooter had been crouched in a military stance.
This individual had the rifle we call in a low ready. It was down. And he was walking on the move. And when he came up to a victim that he was going to kill or shoot, he brought the weapon up and had controlled fire. And then he would come down, assess the situation, and then he would move to the next victim and shoot the next victim. That type of statements that we're getting from witnesses to shootings out here, obviously the first thing we're thinking, this person has some sort of type of training.
It may be hard to get your head around Colomy's conclusion, but law enforcement around the country is concerned about thugs having the wherewithal to use military training and weapons against police. And that's what happened here. This is surveillance tape of Marine Andres Raya, an Iraq veteran who authorities identified as a gang member. Raya led police into this ambush at a liquor store in the small Northern California city of Ceres. When it was over, Police Sergeant Howard Stevenson was dead and Officer Sam Rhino seriously wounded. Experts say it's an example of the very real danger of allowing gang members to enlist in the military.
Now he observes them, and what he's going to do is he's going to go to the high ready position. He's going to open fire, and he's going to move, and he's going to continue his fire. Watch him. He continues his fire at a 45-degree angle, and then he sweeps, which is known as slicing the pie, creating a cone of death. And he will pin those officers. Those officers have no place to go because as he's firing, they can't run away.
Hunter Glass is a retired Fayetteville, North Carolina Police Department gang investigator. He shows this videotape to police and military officials across the country to prepare them for what he says is a growing problem: gang members with better tactical and firearm training than police themselves.
He's not doing Dirty Harry or, Scarface shooting off his hip. He goes straight to a true military position. He's going to go to the high-ready position. This is not something he would have learned off the streets as a gang member. This is something he actually picked up in the military. Look at him. He's taking his time, and we can see the doors open. He's not there to rob this store. He's not. The store owner's moving around.
He's there to trap policemen.
He's there to trap police officers. There's no two ways about it.
In the end, police cornered and killed Raya as he held his position and fired a hail of bullets. The 19-year-old Modesto resident had been scheduled to return to duty. At this moment, what do you think is the single most important thing for Americans to know about gangs in the military?
That it is real, and in the long run, it is a major threat. That is my personal beliefs.
Based on your experience and study of 15 years of this?
Yes, without a doubt. Let's look at how many gang-related deaths there are in the United States on a yearly basis, and then let's see what happens when we start giving them the ability to shoot even better.
A former Army paratrooper, Glass worked the gang detail near Fort Bragg and was one of the first to speak out about gangs in the military. He has collected dozens of photos of gang graffiti in Iraq and servicemen and women showing gang hand signs. He also assisted the Department of Justice in researching its January report, which is titled Gang-Related Activity in the U.S. Armed Forces Increasing. The report raises the specter that gang members would deliberately infiltrate the military. It sent shudders through the nation's law enforcement community.
I see it more of a problem for us in the streets than in the military. And what I think we're going to see after this war is a whole new concept, more violent, a lot more high-profile type robberies and criminal behavior.
Is this because of training gang members receive in the military, from organization to weapons?
Without a doubt. You have gang members that are smart enough to go into the military intelligence fields, and they do get past some of the security clearances from time to time.
Well, I certainly don't want to be flippant in any way about this, but I could hear someone, at least in their mind's ear, saying, you know what, this is a really tough war, and gang members might be pretty handy to handle these tough guys who operate without rules in these two countries, so bring them on. What about that argument?
Well, you can get a really mean junkyard dog, and he's really good at biting people and keeping people out of the junkyard, but if the junkyard folds, what do you do with the dog?
I take your point. Glass tells us about Army Sergeant Jawan Johnson. The 25-year-old father was killed in a gang initiation ritual in a park near his base in Germany. It took place here in what is known as a beat-in.
Most common way to join a gang across the United States, almost any gang, whether it be Latino, whether it be black, white, or other, is to be jumped in, and that requires that you take a beating for so many minutes. You're not allowed to fight back. You're showing how tough you are, and your manhood, so to speak, and you actually just take a severe beating, a physical beating.
The Army offered a $25,000 reward for tips in the case and made some arrests. But Glass says the Army didn't do enough to probe what role gangs may have played in Johnson's death. What's the problem here? If the military has gangs in it, seems to me they'd want to do something about it.
True, would seem that way. But of course, we're also in the midst of a war, and we need a lot of boots on the ground, and so recruitment isn't, well, the war is not as, it's not as touchy-feely as it was a couple of years ago, so getting people to come into the military or stay in the military is getting a little bit more difficult.
The Marines declined to comment for this story. The Army, in a written statement, said in part, "This is a serious issue, but we don't see an increasing trend." Since the Iraq War began, there's been a 65% increase of waivers granted to recruits with criminal records, according to congressional testimony. The Army alone granted more than 8,000. The Army says it, quote, has a sound process for considering and granting waivers, and says that in 2006, it investigated only 10 felony gang cases involving soldiers.
I've interviewed guys that were suspects on a murder of mine that were in the National Guard.
Will Beal is a gang homicide investigator in south central Los Angeles. He told us about the first time he stumbled across enlisted gang members.
Had the guy pull off his shirt And he had the 60 tattoo, and he had some other Crip tattoo, and then he had these other tattoos that didn't look like gang tattoos. Some kind of skull with a helmet on it, and he kind of smirked when he saw my face, and I said, hey, you're not in the military, are you, man? And he said, yeah, I'm in the National Guard. And he said, I just got back from a border mission, Homeland Security. And I was like, oh man, that's, a real sinking feeling that this stuff is going to get out of control.
See, he had served active time in the National Guard as guarding the border.
Guarding our border.
And then he came back and was doing his gang business.
Then he came back on a leave and was doing his gang business.
Describe for me what it's like for a young person to live in South Central. What's it like?
They're constantly aware of the stranglehold that these gangs have on the neighborhood. And so I think for a kid, the decision to join a gang isn't necessarily, at least in my experience, it doesn't look like a moral lapse to me. I think in many cases it's a survival decision.
Beale brought us to South Central, in the heart of rolling 60s Crips turf. Note the gang's graffiti on the tree. He says over decades there have been thousands of unsolved murders in the area, and that dozens of murderers walk free. I noticed for one thing that nearly everybody here has a fence.
Right. A lot of fences, a lot of dogs. You'll see these apartment complexes have heavy steel security gates, like this sort of portcullis in front of the apartment complex.
Well, what happens when you remove a gang member from the gang?
Well, that's hard. You remove a 20-year-old black guy that's got a couple of felonies on his record. He's got some tattoos, and he has an epiphany. He gets knocked off his horse on the road to Damascus and decides he wants to change his entire life. Where does he go? What does he do? He's virtually unemployable.
Well, even McDonald's or Burger King probably wouldn't employ him.
I don't think they're going to want to employ somebody with a felony on their record. I think you'll have a hard time. And, McDonald's or Burger King that's tough duty for a guy trying to raise a family or, trying to pay off debt.
I work at a coffee shop. It's like, I see if I would have had the right parents and the right guidance, I could have been somebody special, I could have done something with my life.
Devon Townsend says he is a former member of the Blood Street Gang. He came from the mean streets of L.A., but it's a life he wants to leave behind by joining the Army.
Being in the gang made me feel safer. It made me feel like I was Lord of the land. It made me feel like I could do whatever I want to. Now I could fight whoever I want to. I was just ignorant, looking for people that felt like me, I didn't really have anybody telling me, go to college, be somebody, I seen a commercial that said, you made them strong, but now we'll make them Army strong. I seen that commercial at 16 years old, and I was like, you know what? I want to be Army strong, because I'm strong now by the things that I've been to that'll go without saying, and the things that I've just accomplished, and even though they weren't much, but to the streets, it's a lot, It's like, yeah, I think I'll be Army strong.
Devon is now a father of two. He just turned 18 and moved his family to a quiet desert community east of Los Angeles. He's been studying for his GED and speaking regularly with an Army recruiter.
They ask me about my past, but I always tell him nothing. I've done nothing because my adult record has nothing on it. Everything I did was juvenile, and I just got off of probation in September, and now I have a clean slate, basically.
Now it's turning the skin kind of white.
Many other former gang members are lining up to wipe clean anything that would prevent them from enlisting, from petitioning to have their juvenile records sealed to literally zapping away vivid remnants of their gang ties. Founded by a Jesuit priest, Los Angeles' Homeboy Industries helps gang members, including those who want to enter the military, leave the criminal life. Many of the employees here are former gang members, and it offers job training and job placement, counseling, and a free tattoo removal service. There is a 1-year waiting list for tattoo removal because demand is so high.
We do have a priority. Our priorities are minors, and anyone that have gang-affiliated tattoos on their face, neck, and arms. as well as anything court-ordered and anyone from placement homes.
Melissa Martinez is a tattoo removal clinician at Homeboy Industries. She says the clinic receives more than a dozen calls from military recruiters each month. The recruits are also allowed to jump the line.
As long as they bring a letter from their recruiter stating that they are going to join and they need these tattoos removed as soon as possible, and then we will schedule them in as soon as possible.
My old hood.
They feel relieved and they have a better opportunity and a clear slate to start off new.
Many see military service as the best chance at permanently straightening out. And for some, it may be a last chance, like Devon Townsend.
I'll risk penitentiary, you know, for happiness, for financial stability, you know. I'd risk going to the penitentiary, honestly. So, I mean, I don't want to. That's why I want to go to the Army. That's why I want to be something more than I am. I want to think differently than I think now, you know? They're gonna see how motivated I am. They're gonna see how determined I am. And I'm standing with my chin directly to your nose, and I'm looking you directly in your eyes, and nothing that you're saying or doing is bothering me. That's how I'm gonna show them. I'm gonna show them with strength. I'm gonna show them that I am Army strong. Because I've mastered the streets, now it's time to master the world.
Devon's recruiter might not know about his gang past, but it's no mystery that teenagers held in juvenile prisons have committed crimes. The Los Angeles Department of Probation, which runs the city's juvenile facilities, estimates that more than 50% of its wards have gang ties. Still, in recent months, representatives from the Army and Marines have visited Los Angeles County juvenile camps on career days. But the county denies the visits were for recruitment.
There is an ignorance on the part of the military as to how to identify and how to screen for gang members.
Congressman Mike Thompson represents a rural district in Northern California, which includes the city of Ceres. It is here where surveillance cameras caught that shootout that left a police officer dead. He worries that the military's need for recruits allowed too many gang members to slip by.
I know that they have lowered their standards, and they're letting folks in now who had performed past actions that in the past would have disallowed them to serve.
This is an important amendment that's the first step.
So Thompson introduced an amendment to the 2008 Defense Authorization Bill that prohibits servicemen and women from joining gangs and associating with gangsters.
And this is the issue of members of criminal street gangs joining the military.
The military did a lot to straighten me out, and I'm sure there are other kids that had that same experience, and I don't think we should shut that door. But we need to make sure that this criminal element is not taking advantage of the military and coming back home and then taking advantage of their community.
Gang police we spoke to say it's a rare gangster who can pry himself from the streets. Homicide investigator Will Beal.
Well, how often do gang members reform? Are you a believer in gang members reforming?
You know, I hope they do. I think that one of the things about my line of work is that if they reform and get out of the life, they don't come up on my radar. So I'm not necessarily in contact with the ones who've actually genuinely gotten out.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong. Sounds to me like you'd like to believe, but you're a bit skeptical.
I haven't run across, in my line of work, many who don't wind up in prison or dead. Once you're in, it seems to me that those are the two ways that you get out.
Gang members in the military. Coming up next, feeding the hungry in Afghanistan. Welcome back. For our final report tonight, we return to the thoughts that began our program, food security. But instead of the Rust Belt of Pennsylvania, we now travel halfway around the globe to a place where basic safety itself is an issue. We've covered Afghanistan extensively on this program, focusing on the military and political obstacles facing the U.S. and its allies as they fight insurgency and lawlessness. But in addition to questions of security and stability, many in Afghanistan have found themselves confronted with food shortages that threaten to undermine their very way of life. Drought has struck the country year after year, putting already poor farmers and their communities at risk. Our reporter-producer in the region, Lucian Reed, traveled with a team from the International Committee of the Red Cross, or ICRC, on a mission to bring food to a people living on the brink.
We started our journey in Kabul, flying north in a Red Cross airplane over a mountainous landscape still blanketed with snow. Our destination was Mazar-e-Sharif, a city of more than 250,000 and a site of pilgrimage for Shiite Muslims in Afghanistan. The jewel of Mazar-e-Sharif is its famous Blue Mosque, whose centuries-old mosaics are enlivened by flocks of white doves. But we were headed for the countryside, where times are hard. Consecutive years of drought have made life precarious for farmers here. And while drought is never a good thing, in this region it is even more catastrophic because there is almost no man-made irrigation here. A viable harvest relies entirely on rainfall.
You have seen the country is very, very dry, and you have rain-fed agriculture. So people every year gambling, will it pay off to put expensive seeds into the soil, hoping that the rains will fall at the right time and that there will be a harvest.
Reto Stocker is the ICRC's head of delegation in Kabul. I spoke to him on a recent visit to Afghanistan, and he said that last year the gamble failed to pay off. Subsistence farmers, who depend on their crops to feed their own families, were confronted by a harvest 75% below normal levels.
Those having done the investment last autumn and this spring essentially didn't yield anything in the rain-fed areas because rains were erratic, did come at the wrong time, and in many areas the harvest was almost zero.
Compared to the rest of the country, security is good in northern Afghanistan, including here in Balkh, a small province that borders Uzbekistan and Tajikistan. But the government and police are still weak here, which allows frequent criminality and pockets of Taliban activity. Our caravan of Red Cross Land Rovers met with trucks hauling food relief some 3 hours southwest of Mazar-e-Sharif. It's in hills like these that last summer's wheat crop failed, leaving over 200,000 people in 3 northern provinces counting on the Red Cross. This was the second of 2 aid packages, each of which included over 250 pounds of food per family. The plan is to help farmers through the winter, buying them time until they can try again with another crop this year. The local people, or beneficiaries as the Red Cross calls them, gathered from the surrounding countryside. And while these people might not look like they're starving, the need is very real.
It is not Ethiopia, it's not Somalia. You don't see people dying by the hundreds or even thousands, as this has repeatedly been seen in African countries when they were facing food shortages. But what we see is that at the level of the household, people are starting to sell goods that they need for their daily survival. If they have to make a choice of trying to buy a bit of food or sending a kid to school or getting some medical treatment for the same kid, the choice ultimately will be with getting some food.
And that's a fact not lost on this crowd.
وقتی انسان درباره 2 چیز زنده است، یکی آب است و دیگه دانه. اگر یکی از هم نباشه انسان از بین شاید خواهد رفت. اگر آب نباشه بودن ما دیگه بسیار محال است. با چی میکنیم؟ فرار. فقط منطقه را اعلام میکنیم و فرار کنیم، به یک جای میریم و که صرف ما یک آب و دانه باشه و با مزریس اگر به هر راهی هست.
اون موافقه ما رسیدیم، اون مشکل شما هم حل میشه. دیگه سر و صدا نمیکنین، این لیست و گپایتون میمونین، غالمغال نمیکنین، لیستان خوانده میشه. به نوبت بین موادتان تسلیم شین و بس خلاص کدام گفتنی ها داشتیم با ما در خط میگار فرمانش کنیم.
The assembled group wait on the other side of a cord while the ICRC staff go through their process,
محمد یار
introducing a little extra bureaucracy to lives that would normally be more focused on the details of planting and harvesting.
Usually these families would be able to maintain a traditional livelihood, a sustainable livelihood, without problem, mainly basing themselves on wheat cultivation and some additional crops. We're going to stay in Chakanok.
Daniel Fugger is an economic security delegate for the ICRC. He says that repeated cycles of drought force farmers to sell off their oxen and other farm animals for food money, meaning they are unable to resume farming even when the rains come back.
If they face such a drought combined, for example, with this harsh winter of last year for more than 1, 2, 3 years, and then they will come to the point where they cannot adapt anymore, but where aid from the outside is required to give them a kickstart, to give them a booster, to allow them to come to a sustainable livelihood again. If not, they will be forced to leave their villages and to go to the main hubs, to the bigger cities.
This man complained that the government was doing little to help.
نیم بوجه لوبیا میگیرن 2 تا چای میگیرن 2 تا نمک میگیرن 3 قوطی روغن میگیرن 1 خلطه شکر رقم دفعه اول ببره بخیر.
And with little other help in sight, these modest bags of food become a critical barrier against forced migration.
For the 40,000 families that we have assisted, receiving 2 times 120 kgs of food over the winter time definitely makes a huge difference, including the one of not having to leave their homes, because they indeed do have enough food carrying them over the lean season.
Recent weeks have brought heavy rainfall to many parts of Afghanistan, improving prospects for this year's harvest and giving hope to farmers. Back here in the United States, water continues to be an issue in a place from which we recently reported, the community of Huron in California's fertile Central Valley. Here, drought and water restrictions imposed by the Endangered Species Act mean this farming mecca may dry up in a few years.
The day after our program aired, Secretary of the Interior Ken Salazar announced that Uncle Sam was stepping in. $260 million of federal stimulus money will be directed at helping California deal with its water woes. $40 million of that is going straight to immediate relief for the area we profiled, drilling new wells, addressing hunger, unemployment, and homelessness. Another $20 million will go to protecting the Delta smelt, the species of fish that's caused the shutdown in irrigation in California's Central Valley. And yet, tens of thousands of farm workers marched, a 4-day trek to demand more aggressive solutions. Leaders in the region say the Obama administration's efforts are not enough. Even Governor Schwarzenegger showed up to lend his voice.
From the rich soils of Central California to the windswept hills of Afghanistan to the food auctions across America's heartland, concerns about food security. And that's our program for tonight. From New York, for HDNet, Dan Rather reporting. Good night.
If you would like to add your name to an email list for information on upcoming programs, or if you would just like to send a question or comment, please email us at viewer@hd.net.